In 1991, American Video Entertainment, a company releasing video games for the Nintendo Entertainment System without a license, released a brand new puzzle game by a little-known developer. Today, the game is known more for its box art and placement on the top 10 lists for weirdest and possibly worst games on the platform. But what players don't know is that not only is the game actually fun to play, but the person that created it not only was a pioneer in artificial intelligence, but he claims to have named the internet itself. But before we get into the internet, let's talk about Dudes with Attitude. Dudes with Attitude is the brainchild of Michael Crick, son of biologist Francis Crick and Michael's daughter, Cam. Before Dudes, Michael's experience in game development was Frogmaster and Break Street for the Commodore 64, but one phone call coming from American Video and asking if he could come up with a new game in 10 weeks was the catalyst for this brand new puzzle game. Taking his 4 children to the mountains, they brainstormed. The idea for Dudes, a simple puzzle game where you play as characters moving through a maze and using various items to properly go through it, came from his younger daughter, Cam. Cam, who had also come up with the graphics and the name, helped create the game with her dad. After creating a level editor on their Amiga, Michael invited his kids and their friends to create their own levels. The levels were then photographed, posted on a wall, and they graded them for difficulty and fun. Out of the selection, 32 made the cut, arranged by hardness. Dudes is a game greatly known to its fans and enemies for its difficulty, but also for its inclusion of a level creator, a luxury not all that common in games of the period, or even now. The difficulty, however, would be adjusted a bit for the game's spin-off, Trolls on Treasure Island, which actually came with a troll attached to the box. Dudes would later be re-released on American Video's Maxivision 15-in-1 cartridge, which was endorsed by Hulk Hogan in an eccentric promotional event directed by Food Fight video game producer Phil Mickelson. Michael's first game, Frogmaster, was actually an early attempt at machine learning. In Frogmaster, you'd observe a group of frogs making random movements, where you would then press a reinforcement button when they did something that you wanted them to keep doing. Going on like this, the frogs would continue to learn how to play their own little primitive game of football and reach the other side of the field. Essentially, it was a computerized game based on B.F. Skinner's principles of operant conditioning, or shaping animal behavior. But Frogmaster wasn't originally developed for the Commodore 64 or the Atari 8-bit computer. It was developed as its own piece of hardware in 1965 as Michael's own experimental electronic brain. According to Crick, there were 9 of these neurons plus a thalamus control board. Each board controlled one of a 3x3 array of small lights. The lights displayed once a second with a probability based on the charge of the capacitor. If you pressed the reward button, the capacitor gained charge, otherwise it lost charge. The charge controlled the likelihood that the corresponding light would go on at the next second pulse. With a little patience, you could train the lights to any of the 512 possible 3x3 patterns. A significant feature was that the wiring between the boards and the lights was completely random. This was based on an assumption that the human brain is not pre-wired, but its wiring is the result of training. In other words, the hardware was built to learn how it was wired. Crick showed the hardware brain to Richard Herrnstein, the head of psychology at Harvard. Herrnstein, being incredibly impressed, offered to take over as Crick's PhD supervisor. The brain was also shown to an old family friend, Alex Rich, who then suggested that Crick interview for a job at Bolt, Beranek & Newman, or BBN. Crick had 2 decisions. He could join the Harvard psychology department and possibly be known as one of the founders of AI theory, or he could take the job at BBN. Crick took the job at BBN. The group he joined was trying to solve a problem in communications for the Advanced Research Project Agency, or ARPA. One of the members, Bob Kahn, figured that the correct approach would be a new concept called packet switching. Crick's job was to model the behavior of the various proposed networking options and concluded that one of the proposals was the best and was to be adopted. The proposal, using pulses to learn how the network was configured, was rather similar to his own hardware brain. A full proposal was being prepared to be sent to ARPA to solve the communication problem. 6 weeks before the proposal was to be sent, a meeting was held to gather loose ends. One of the last things that they needed to figure out was what to call it. Names were being called out by the team and written on a chalkboard by Crick. He thought all the names were too long and what they needed was a short, snappy name. When Crick was asked to come up with such a name, he thought back to the previous ones he had come up with for other projects, such as Interwink or Interlink. Suddenly, he blurted out, Internet, and wrote it on the chalkboard with the others. Ironically, there was some argument that ARPANET was a better name so that they could win the contract. Crick, slightly miffed, pointed out that if the project was a huge success, it would hardly be named after a US government agency. One meeting attendee remarked, "If that happens, we can change it back to the internet." And this is what happened 15 years later. Unfortunately, Crick still struggles to find the other 12 people who were at the meeting in 1967 to corroborate the story. Later, Crick would go on to help develop CPU-CMS, one of IBM's first operating systems, as well as help develop Microsoft Windows and install the first spell checker in Microsoft Word. He also helped write the original spec for John Madden Football and The Sims, both of which have grossed over $7 billion. So if you're ever looking for another NES game to play with a weird premise and simplistic gameplay, or you want to do some virtual breakdancing, or maybe train frogs to play football, play the games by Michael Crick, the dude that named the internet. If Crick's electronic brain didn't make any sense to you, don't worry, I was struggling to get it myself. But something that can help make things a little clearer is Brilliant. Brilliant is an online learning site and app where you can take courses on subjects like math, science, and programming and data management. Basically, it's a STEM textbook, but without the headache. Playing Frogmasters is pretty confusing, and understanding how AI is built with something as simple as that is even more confusing. With Brilliant, you can actually learn how that training works. As someone who isn't a huge STEM guy, I actually enjoy learning with Brilliant because the lessons actually feel relevant. Brilliant does a great job helping you learn on the go whenever you have a spare few minutes and keep that learning habit going. The lessons are interactive instead of only being multiple choice questions, so you get to immerse yourself in the material. To try Brilliant out yourself, visit brilliant.org/okso and you'll get a full 30-day trial. If you end up liking Brilliant, you'll even get a 20% discount on your annual subscription. So give it a shot.